pass on the family name and the genetics. I mean, again, these are antiquated reasons at best, to be honest. No one cares about your family name, okay, or your bloodline. Another common argument that I hear for, why I should have kids, that I went through the entire pressure system of, hey, you're going to be 40, you want to make sure you're married by 40. I mean, that seems to be the latest kind of benchmark for men. We're going to discuss the right and wrong reasons to get married and have children. Looking at marriage and child raising historically and picking up the good things from history and then cross-referencing them with all the contemporary kind of privileges that we have now, and making the right decision for you at the right time. And I think that just puts so much pressure on women especially to rush and have children. And this is where the term it takes a village to raise a child comes from, right? It literally took a village to raise a child. If I'm in a relationship with somebody and the topic of kids come up, one of the most important questions that I think you should ask the other person, the human race is fine. It doesn't need you to have children to continue. And the stigma that has historically surrounded people who don't get married and people who don't have children is that if you have an appreciation for life and being present and enjoying all the wonderful things that are around us every nanosecond, the only way to have a meaningful relationship, and if you want to source that meaningful relationship need for yourself from other places, you can, and you don't have to get married. And that's kind of the whole point of this video. You don't have to get married to get some of these kind of benefits of what are pitched as benefits to getting married and having children. Welcome to another episode of Good Problems to Have with David Nima. I am your host, David Nima, author of the book, Good Problems to Have, The Anatomy of Contemporary Happiness. And in today's video, we are going to discuss the right and wrong reasons to get married and have children. Marriage and children are obviously some of the most popular topics worldwide among people that are unmarried and don't have children. And in fact, married people talk about marriage and children a lot too. But I think this message is really to the people who are unmarried and or don't have children. What I want to talk about on today's video is just kind of my perspective on this whole pitch for marriage and children that we've all been kind of exposed to for most of our lives. Now, of course, myself, I have never been married and I don't have any children. Okay. And, I am 42 and a half years old. I went through the entire pressure system of, hey, you're going to be 40. You want to make sure you're married by 40. I mean, that seems to be the latest kind of benchmark for men in terms of by when I should be married and have kids. I don't want to be too old by the time I have children, right? I don't want to be 70 something when they're 20 something, for example. I mean, we've all heard a lot of this nonsense. And, that's kind of why I want to help my, friends and family and anyone else who's listening to this video that is not married or doesn't have children, or maybe doesn't want more children if they have children already, in terms of to take the pressure off, a little bit about how, this kind of rush to get married and have children. And the social pressure is so immense. It's within our own families and our societies and communities, the marketing machine that we're all exposed to, and the stigma that has historically surrounded people who don't get married and people who don't have children. I think we're all very aware that a lot of that stigma is starting to be relieved. And I think that's a very good thing. And I'm here to kind of help remove that stigma, and the social pressure to get married and have children. First, I like to think about these what I call the antiquated arguments for marriage and children. Okay, what I mean by antiquated means that, in contrast to the subtitle of the book, which is The Anatomy of Contemporary Happiness. That means happiness in contemporary times, in modern times, in 2023, as opposed to what was considered, the formula for happiness over the last, thousands of years, hundreds of years, going throughout history, right? Some things have changed in terms of what creates happiness and how to achieve happiness. And that's what I primarily discuss in the book. But these antiquated arguments, right, for marriage and children, for example, people want to have children so that their children can take care of them when they're older. I mean, is that a good reason to have children? Is that even a good reason to bring someone into this life so that you can have elderly care secured for you when you're older? Now again, I understand that maybe 150 years ago or 500 years ago, this was essential. There was no kind of health care or elderly care services, right? But in contemporary society, there are nursing homes. There are a lot of different ways for elderly people to get care. You don't need to source that from your children. You don't need to have children specifically to get elderly care. It's ridiculous, okay? That's kind of like getting married so that your wife can cook for you or your husband can cook for you. That's absurd. That's an absurd reason to get married. You have the ability to cook for yourself or order out or hire a personal chef, okay? So that's a transactional kind of decision to have children because you want elderly care, and I don't think it's a good reason to have children. Of course, back in historical times, people would rely on their children to do labor and provide income for the family, right? Another antiquated reason to have children, right? That of course most people nowadays, they don't necessarily rely on their children for income. Some may do, some may receive income from their children if their children have careers or maybe have careers as adults. But, 500 years ago, 5 and 10-year-olds were being sent out to the field to work and produce income for the family. That's not happening anymore. So again, another antiquated reason to want to have children. Another reason is just not wanting to be alone. Okay, and I understand, I think that is one of the most compelling reasons. Of course, we discuss having meaningful relationships throughout Good Problems to Have and throughout this podcast. Having meaningful relationships is essential to happiness and having a rich social life or social capital, so to speak. And having meaningful relationships with your children is also highly beneficial. However, as we discussed in previous episodes, the brain does not differentiate about the nature of the relationship you have. So it doesn't have to be a meaningful relationship with your literal children. You can have a meaningful relationship with other people, and your brain is equally happy because it's not alone. And it's checking off that kind of primal urge for socialization and social integration that has been proven to be some of the most important components and factors to happiness and longevity. Okay, so again, trying to certainly there's a good chance that you will have a meaningful relationship with your children, but this is not the only way to have a meaningful relationship. And if you want to source that meaningful relationship need for yourself from other places, you can, and you don't have to get married. And that's kind of the whole point of this video. You don't have to get married to get some of these kind of benefits of what are pitched as benefits to getting married and having children. Another antiquated reason for having children is to pass the bloodline. Okay, to pass on your genetics, right? To be respectful to your ancestors, to pass on the family name, for example. And again, these things are really just antiquated. They're antiquated reasons. Who cares about your bloodline and your family name, or even, continuing the human race? The human race is fine. It doesn't need you to have children to continue. Okay. We've gone from, about 1 billion people just 100 plus years ago, under 200 years ago, to now 7 billion. We have 7x the global population that was developing over maybe 10,000 years, or maybe even longer, of human species on Earth, reached up to about 1 billion in the late 19th century. And now we're looking at 7 billion, going on 8 billion. We have 8x the global population in just the last 100 years. So, the world will be fine if you don't have children. Okay. The human species is going to continue. Okay. And again, I think you're fooling yourself if this is the reason why you're making the biggest decision in your life, which is to have offspring, right? By wanting to pass on the family name and the genetics. I mean, again, these are antiquated reasons at best, to be honest. No one cares about your family name, okay, or your bloodline. It's also interesting, thinking about marriage and children historically, right? For right up till the Industrial Revolution in the late 19th century, which tremendously transformed a lot of different components of society, most people were born and died within a roughly 25-mile radius. Okay, there wasn't this kind of globalization that we've seen in the last couple of 100 years, where you're likely to meet people from all corners of the world just by going to New York City, for example. So everything was a lot more localized, and when you did get married and have children, people were likely to live, the parents were likely to still live very closely to their own parents and their cousins and their uncles and their aunts and their grandparents. And it was a community type of living situation, right? And this is where the term, it takes a village to raise a child, comes from, right? It literally took a village to raise a child. You didn't have just two parents by themselves figuring things out on their own. They had a tremendous support group, okay? But now you have some couples, for example, you have one person from New York, another person from Los Angeles. They get married and live in Texas, right? Isolated from their own families, so to speak. And they have this average kind of 2.4 kids, with parents, with potentially full-time jobs, and very little of that kind of village type of support group that has historically supported parents, throughout time. Okay. Now, of course, some people do live in close proximity to their grandparents and their family, and they do get this level of support, but some people don't. Some people have no idea that historically it literally took a village to raise a child. And I think if you can understand that and appreciate that, then potentially you can make a better decision of when and if to have a child. Another thing that I think it's very interesting to me, that from my own perspective, is that I can kind of forecast the type of parent somebody is likely to be based on the relationships that person has right now in their lives. Okay. So let's say if I'm on a date with somebody, or if I'm in a relationship with somebody and I'm considering this person to be the parent of my child, right? And I want to think to myself, what type of parent will this person be? And one of the things I look at is this person's relationship with their friends, with their family, with their coworkers, with their community. Are they constantly in fights and drama with these people? Or are they in meaningful, constructive relationships together? Okay. Because, similar to, people say how your date treats the waiter is how your date is going to treat you in 5 years. Okay. How your date treats other relationships that they have is how that person is going to treat their child in 10, 15 years. Okay. So it's an indicator. Okay. And if you have somebody who just, has toxic relationships with a lot of people, you can be pretty sure that that person is likely to have a toxic relationship with their child as well once the novelty kind of wears off. Another common argument that I hear for why I should have kids is someone will tell me, hey, you don't understand, watching my child being born was the most amazing feeling in the world. It was the most amazing feeling in the world. And I agree with that. I'm sure that felt amazing to experience. And I think what you have to understand is that humans are wired to feel that euphoria when they're witnessing their child being born. Okay? In fact, it would be weird if you didn't feel exhilarated and you didn't feel excited and happy when you were watching your child being born. So, again, that's not a really good argument for me. You can feel that exhilaration doing a lot of different things without making a commitment to raising another human being for the rest of your life. But this argument of watching my child being born was the most amazing feeling of, my life. It was the most amazing feeling ever. To me, is not a good argument to, as for why I should make this commitment. Some other times I hear, for example, it's just so amazing to see your child, taking its first steps, or, having ice cream for the first time, or on their first day of school, for example, or maybe even walking down the aisle getting married, right? And I can understand that is a tremendously, fulfilling experience for the parent to watch their child kind of go through these experiences. But my counter to that is that if you have an appreciation for life and being present and enjoying all the wonderful things that are around us every nanosecond, you can appreciate everybody taking a lick of ice cream. You can appreciate everybody taking their first steps or their millionth step. Okay? You can appreciate anybody, whether it's someone close to you or a complete stranger, graduating high school or walking down the aisle or whatever other thing that, you are appreciating seeing your child do. I mean, you can appreciate yourself doing them, first of all, as well as your loved ones, other loved ones in your life, and the strangers and the community around you. You do not have to have a child to appreciate the wonders of experiencing ice cream for the first time. If I'm in a relationship with somebody and the topic of kids come up, one of the most important questions that I think you should ask the other person, your potential significant other, the potential parent of your children, is, why do you want to have kids? Why? Right? And in my opinion, the only correct answer is an answer that includes the words sacrifice. Sacrifice. You have to want to sacrifice for the well-being of your child. You have to be willing, ready, and able to make a lot of sacrifices, big and small, for the well-being of your child. Just a couple of sacrifices can include losing a good night's sleep, not being able to go out and party as much in your social life. You might even have to be forced to stay in a bad marriage for the well-being of your children. There's a lot of sacrifice involved in raising children. So if I'm not hearing the word sacrifice coming out of my date's mouth when I ask, why do you want to have children? Red flag. This person wants to have children for a lot of the wrong reasons, okay? Unless they are front and center about, their kind of desire to sacrifice and make substantial sacrifices. I mean, we're talking even giving your entire life to, this endeavor, sacrificing your life for the well-being of the child, which many parents will do, right? But I think what's interesting to me is that if you're not willing to sacrifice, and then, you get a couple of problems in your life or maybe in your marriage, and then all of a sudden the children take a back seat. They take a back seat to the parents and, their own personal trials and tribulations, going through a divorce, for example. And all of a sudden the children are not these, wonderful sources of happiness that everyone's selling you on. So you got to you got to be willing and ready and able to kind of be going into parenting and being a parent by making sacrifices and being ready to make substantial sacrifices, including the ultimate sacrifice, okay? Which means all other sacrifices beneath that, don't even compare to the ultimate sacrifice. And I want to hear that from anyone that wants to be the parent of my child, right? And I will, if I'm ready to have children, then I would, approach it from that perspective. I think another good litmus test of whether or not somebody is truly ready to sacrifice for the well-being of a child is whether or not they would be open to adopting a child rather than having their own children, right? Now, I would ask that question. I would ask that question to, let's say I'm someone that I'm in a relationship with, and I would say, what are your feelings on adoption? I mean, adoption checks off a lot of the boxes that are sold to you in terms of reasons to have children, right? Helping somebody be a better person and survive in the world, for example, right? Nurturing and kind of fulfilling your nurturing, that kind of innate nurturing need that urge that you might be having. And, there's certainly a lot of children that need good parents, good, capable, willing parents who are willing, ready, and able to make sacrifices. I mean, you can bet that there is a lot of children that would love to have you as a parent if you feel that you are emotionally, financially, and otherwise ready to be a parent. Adoption, I mean, that child would tremendously benefit from a parent like you. So would you adopt, or do you want to have your own child, right? Do you want to make sure the child kind of looks like you and smells like you? Now, some people may make the argument that, if you have a child that's not yours, genetically, they may have a whole slew of different kinds of, biological issues that, you don't have. Well, they may have fewer biological and genetic issues than you don't have. So that cuts both ways. But, I think if you want to kind of put your name into the parenting hat and become a parent, but you're not willing to adopt, that to me tells me a lot about your motivations for wanting to be a parent. And it doesn't look like the term sacrifice is going to be among those motivations, which is, again, another red flag. Adoption is a fantastic option here for those that truly want to make the sacrifice to becoming a parent. And it also releases that kind of pressure valve in terms of this age limit of, oh my God, you got to get married and have children before a certain time, because otherwise you're going to be too old, right? You're going to be too old to have children. You're going to be too old to even be able to have children for women, right? And I think that just puts so much pressure on women especially to rush and have children. And it just completely, you're missing the point here in terms of why you want to have children. Okay? And you're making some really, really important and long-lasting decisions in terms of who to marry and having children, and all under, I think what are like potentially misguided premises. Okay? So, include the term sacrifice into your reasons for parenting and wanting to become a parent, which should therefore open the door to adoption and therefore release the valve of social pressure and time pressure to get married and have children before a certain time. pause it right there. This is a very long discussion, but I hope that, you took away something here in terms of, what's going on, looking at marriage and child raising historically and picking out the good things from history and then cross-referencing them with all the contemporary kind of privileges that we have now and making the right decision for you at the right time, and especially not, be stressed over the social pressures, especially for women, to have children by a certain time. I mean, that's something that troubles me deeply, and I see so many women stress out over that. And I hope that some of the things that we discussed in this video can help you, whether you're a man, a woman, or any other gender, make a more informed decision on how and when you want to become a parent, if at all. Thank you for listening. This is David Nima, author of the book, Good Problems to Have, available on Amazon. Make sure to follow Good Problems to Have on Instagram and YouTube at GPH Lifestyle, and I will see you guys on the next video.